You have a thankful muscle in your heart, and it has to be exercised. This is not something that comes naturally to most people, but if you practice the language of thanksgiving, it will become natural. It will change your work. It will change your relationships. Just give thanks. Hello and welcome back to the Worship Devotional. We spent the last 4 lessons talking about why we should worship and what happens when we worship. We learned that there's a joyful exchange. Psalm 16 says, in His presence there is fullness of joy. And so we want to start getting into worship. And these next few lessons are going to be about the secret place. The place of worship and communion with God. It's not a physical location. This isn't going to a place. Think of it as a heart posture. Psalm 91 verse 1 says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High God shall abide in the shadow of the Almighty." We want to dwell in the secret place. David said this in Psalm 27 verse 4, "One thing I have asked from the Lord, that I shall seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in His temple." So David says he wants one thing, and then he describes it using 3 different illustrations. He wants to dwell in the house of the Lord. He wants to behold Him, to look on Him, and to meditate on Him. This is a complete fixation. It's an infatuation. He wants to be where the Lord is. He wants to be looking at the Lord, and he wants to be thinking only of the Lord all the days of his life. That is what is in the heart of David, who the scripture says was a man after God's own heart. So we want what David wants. We want the heart for God. We want to be men and women after God's heart, and this is what was in his heart. To dwell in the house of the Lord, to behold His beauty, and to meditate on Him. So how do we get there? That's the first step. How do we get our heart in that posture? The answer lies in Psalm 100 verse 4. It says, "Enter His gates with thanksgiving and His courts with praise. Give thanks to Him, bless His name." And so, again, the secret place is not an actual place, but it's a very good metaphor. And if this verse here carries on with that metaphor of entering the gates of the Lord and entering His courts. If you think of it this way, imagine you're trying to have a conversation with the king, but you're outside the city walls. He's in the throne room and you're outside the city walls. And you're like, I can't hear anything the king is saying. And maybe you've had that experience with God where you have a very difficult time hearing what He's saying. The reality is, proximity is not the issue. It's not that God has abandoned you, He's far away, and that you need to enter where He is. No, it's the heart posture, the language that you're speaking. The language of your heart is not one that creates connection with God. If you can't seem to hear from the Lord, it may be that you're not in His courts. You haven't entered His gates. Well, how do you do that in your heart? It's the language of thanksgiving. That's the very first thing. Thanksgiving is the language of heaven, right? As soon as God created the earth, and all through the days of creation, He says it's good. He is, in a sense, giving thanks for what He just made. It's good, it's good. And then at the end, He looks on everything that He made. He said it's very good, and He rested. He rested and enjoyed His creation. Think about this, too. This is an interesting idea. If the language of heaven is thanksgiving, then what's the language of hell? It's complaining, the opposite. So if you can enter heaven's gates with thanksgiving, whose gates are you entering when you complain? We have a society now, especially the West, where we complain about a lot of things. And it's not to say that you can't see an issue and address it, but the language of complaining is not the language of heaven. You have a thankful muscle in your heart, and it has to be exercised. This is not something that comes naturally to most people, but if you practice the language of thanksgiving, it will become natural. It will change your work. It will change your relationships. Just give thanks and start with giving thanks to the Lord. Thank you. If you have a hard time coming up with what to be thankful for, read Psalm 136. There's a lot of good things in there. Read other Psalms. The Psalms are constantly giving thanks. But this has to be a part of our lives every day, throughout the moments of the day, not just daily, moment by moment. Even in a hard situation, even in difficult times and moments of loss, you have to be able to find something to be thankful for. It's hard. That's a difficult task, but that's the language of heaven. And that's how we communicate with Him. I hope you're blessed today. I want to encourage you to give thanks in all things and go and listen to You and You Alone live from Upper Room. If you're watching on YouTube, there's going to be a link here at the end. You and You Alone. It's just a song of thanksgiving. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.